Whoever saves one life saves the world entire. Schindler's List wasn't just a Holocaust drama, it was a devastating act of cinematic memory, a film that bled pain and redemption onto celluloid. Behind its stark black and white frames lay a production as emotionally grueling as it was historically vital. Spielberg wept behind the camera, actors broke down in costume, and even survivors of the Holocaust fainted while visiting the set. Today we're peeling back the curtain to reveal 20 shocking facts about Schindler's List, secrets of production breakdowns, studio fears, and haunting moments that scarred cast and crew alike. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, a hidden truth Spielberg never planned to reveal, one that reshapes how we understand the film's final image. So brace yourself, because this isn't just history, it's cinema that nearly shattered the people making it. Let's dive in. Spielberg almost didn't direct the film. Steven Spielberg, now synonymous with Schindler's List, originally turned it down multiple times. He felt he wasn't mature enough to handle the Holocaust. The project floated between directors, including Martin Scorsese and Roman Polanski. Scorsese eventually stepped aside, believing Spielberg was the one who had to tell it. When Spielberg finally committed, he said he felt summoned by history itself. Not ambition, but responsibility. He didn't want to make the film, he felt he had to. What audiences didn't know is that the defining film of Spielberg's career almost slipped through his hands, a haunting what if that could have rewritten cinematic history. Filming in Poland shattered the cast and crew. Schindler's List wasn't filmed on sound stages in Hollywood, it was shot on location in Kraków, Poland, just steps away from where atrocities happened. Spielberg insisted on authenticity, even reconstructing parts of Auschwitz, though never filming inside the actual camp. Survivors who visited the set broke down in tears, some collapsing at the sight of Nazi uniforms. Actor Ben Kingsley later recalled the atmosphere as grief-stricken silence punctuated by breakdowns. Not just filmmaking, but collective mourning. What audiences didn't realize is that the film wasn't just recreating the Holocaust, it was reawakening its ghosts, leaving scars on everyone involved. Robin Williams kept Spielberg from depression. Directing Schindler's List drained Spielberg emotionally. After long days of shooting, he admitted he would fall into deep depression. To cope, he arranged nightly phone calls with his friend Robin Williams, who would perform improvised comedy routines just for him. Spielberg said Williams' laughter was his only escape from the crushing weight of Holocaust imagery, not distraction, but survival. Without Williams' comic relief, Spielberg doubted he could have finished the film. What audiences didn't know is that one of the darkest movies in history was sustained by laughter bubbling through phone lines from half a world away. Spielberg refused to take a salary. Unlike his blockbuster hits, Spielberg refused to profit personally from Schindler's List. He called any earnings from the Holocaust blood money. Instead, he donated his director's fee and back-end profits to establish the Shoah Foundation, dedicated to recording survivor testimonies. To date, the foundation has preserved over 55,000 testimonies, ensuring the memory of genocide will never be silenced. Not profit, but preservation. What audiences didn't know is that Spielberg turned one of Hollywood's biggest paychecks into a lifeline for history itself, proving that some films aren't made for money. They're made for truth. Actors broke down during the massacre scenes. During the liquidation of the Kraków ghetto sequence, hundreds of extras, many of them actual Holocaust survivors or their descendants, collapsed emotionally while filming. Some cried uncontrollably at the sight of Nazi uniforms and mock executions. One survivor reportedly fainted when he saw actors dressed as SS officers barking orders. Spielberg later said he underestimated how visceral the recreations would feel to those with generational trauma. Not staged, but relived, those scenes weren't just reenactments. They were psychic wounds torn open again. What audiences didn't know is that Schindler's List wasn't just filmed, it was endured. Liam Neeson was an unlikely choice. When Spielberg cast Liam Neeson as Oskar Schindler, many in Hollywood were baffled. Neeson wasn't a box office star nor a household name. Spielberg, however, saw something others didn't, an ability to balance charm with moral ambiguity. Schindler wasn't a saint. He was a flawed opportunist who evolved into a rescuer. Neeson's mix of charisma and quiet strength made the transformation believable. The role launched him to international fame, even earning him an Oscar nomination. Not obvious casting, but daring intuition. What audiences didn't know is that one of cinema's most iconic performances was almost dismissed before it began. Ralph Fiennes scared the cast and crew. Ralph Fiennes' portrayal of the sadistic Nazi officer Amon Goeth was so chilling that even crew members felt uneasy around him. Dressed in his SS uniform, Fiennes carried an aura of menace that blurred the line between acting and reality. Extras avoided eye contact, and some survivors on set broke down when he walked by. Ben Kingsley later admitted he couldn't separate Fiennes from Goeth during filming. Not just a role, but embodiment. Fiennes became the monster, and the set trembled in his shadow. What audiences didn't know is that the villain's cruelty infected the atmosphere long after cameras stopped rolling. Spielberg shot in black and white against studio demands. Universal executives wanted Schindler's List in color, fearing audiences wouldn't watch a black and white film in 1993. Spielberg refused. He argued that the Holocaust wasn't a story for glossy Hollywood aesthetics. It had to look like the newsreels of the 1940s. The stark monochrome stripped the film of distraction, making it feel like history unfolding in real time. Not just artistic choice, but moral stand. What audiences didn't realize is that the film's signature look was born out of defiance, and it transformed Schindler's List from movie into testimony. The girl in the red coat was Spielberg's emotional anchor. In a sea of black and white, one image sears itself into memory: the little girl in the red coat. Spielberg said this moment was inspired by survivor testimonies about the indifference of bystanders. The red coat symbolized the world's selective blindness to genocide. The girl's fate, later seen among corpses, mirrored humanity's failure. Spielberg admitted he filmed the sequence for himself as a way of processing his own anger. Not stylistic flourish, but cry of rage. What audiences didn't know is that the red coat was Spielberg's private scream against silence. The cast held nightly vigils. The emotional toll of filming was unbearable at times. To cope, the cast, including Liam Neeson, Ben Kingsley, and many extras, gathered nightly for group vigils, prayers, and quiet reflection. These rituals became essential for survival, creating a sense of family amid darkness. Spielberg often joined, sometimes breaking down in tears. Crew members later said these moments of solidarity prevented people from quitting. Not just a production, but a community healing itself day by day. What audiences didn't know is that Schindler's List wasn't simply acted, it was spiritually endured. And before we move to the next fact, go ahead and like and subscribe, because just like the cast clung to each other to survive the weight of history, this channel thrives when you're with us. Stick around. What's coming next will stun you even more. Spielberg never watched the finished film again. After completing Schindler's List, Spielberg admitted he could never sit through it in full. He watched the dailies, approved the edit, and supervised sound, but once it was complete, he walked away. He explained, "It's not a film I made for me. It's a film I made for other people." For him, revisiting it would reopen wounds he barely survived the first time. Not rewatching, but releasing. The film wasn't his to own anymore, it was history's. What audiences didn't know is that the man who directed Schindler's List never allowed himself to relive it on screen. A deleted scene was too painful to keep. Spielberg cut one of the most harrowing sequences during editing, a scene where Jewish prisoners are forced to sing for their Nazi tormentors before execution. Survivors on set found the recreation so overwhelming that many begged Spielberg not to include it. He later admitted the footage felt exploitative, as if he was re-traumatizing people for the sake of cinema. Not omission, but respect. He cut it to protect the dignity of survivors. What audiences didn't know is that Schindler's List could have been even darker, but Spielberg drew a line out of compassion. Survivors appeared in the final scene. The tearful epilogue where real Holocaust survivors place stones on Oskar Schindler's grave wasn't just a cinematic flourish, it was testimony. Spielberg gathered actual Schindler-Juden, the Jews saved by Schindler, to honor his memory on film. Each survivor was paired with the actor who portrayed them. The sequence transformed Schindler's List from reenactment into living history. Not performance, but witness. What audiences didn't realize is that those final moments weren't scripted. They were sacred ritual captured forever on film. The studio feared it would flop. Universal Studios executives worried audiences wouldn't embrace a black and white Holocaust film over 3 hours long. They warned Spielberg he was risking his career momentum after Jurassic Park. Yet when it premiered, Schindler's List earned 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. More importantly, it grossed nearly $300 million worldwide, proving audiences would embrace painful truth. Not commercial gamble, but cultural necessity. What audiences didn't know is that the film industry nearly dismissed Schindler's List as a niche project, blind to the fact it would become one of the most essential films ever made. The Auschwitz scene was nearly stopped. When Spielberg filmed scenes near Auschwitz, he faced fierce criticism. Polish officials and Jewish leaders feared it was disrespectful to recreate atrocities so close to sacred ground. Spielberg assured them he would not film inside the camp itself, only at a carefully reconstructed replica nearby. Survivors were invited to oversee production and advise on accuracy. Still, tension was high, and Spielberg admitted he doubted himself every day. Not invasion, but reverence. The choice to film nearby wasn't about spectacle, but about forcing authenticity. What audiences didn't know is that Schindler's List almost lost its most chilling location due to moral outrage. The crew refused to eat during Holocaust scenes. During the liquidation and camp sequences, the set atmosphere was so heavy that crew members lost their appetites. Catering stations went untouched, and some people fasted out of respect. Spielberg noted that meals became somber gatherings, with cast and crew often sitting in silence. Many extras, descendants of survivors, broke down while filming and couldn't return to eat. Not just acting, but mourning. What audiences didn't know is that even off-camera, the weight of genocide silenced hunger itself, turning the set into a place of reverence more than production. The shower scene traumatized extras. Of the most harrowing moments is when women are herded into a shower, fearing gas, only to find water pouring from the spigots. For many extras, many of whom were Jewish women in Poland, the scene was unbearable. Some wept uncontrollably even after cameras stopped rolling. Spielberg later said it was the hardest day of filming, admitting he questioned whether recreating such terror was ethically right. Not just dramatization, but near re-traumatization. What audiences didn't know is that for those women, the line between memory and reenactment disappeared, leaving lasting scars. John Williams initially refused to score the film. When Spielberg asked John Williams to compose the score, the legendary composer turned him down at first. Williams said, "You need a better composer than I am for this film." Spielberg replied, "I know, but they're all dead." Williams agreed, but only after insisting the score be restrained, led by the mournful violin of Itzhak Perlman. The result became one of the most haunting soundtracks in film history. Not musical decoration, but lament. What audiences didn't know is that even John Williams doubted he was worthy of the film's weight. Spielberg filmed Jurassic Park and Schindler's List back-to-back. In a shocking twist of timing, Spielberg directed two vastly different films in the same year. He finished Jurassic Park and immediately began Schindler's List, handling post-production for the dinosaur blockbuster at night while shooting Holocaust horrors during the day. The emotional whiplash nearly broke him. He said the levity of Jurassic Park felt hollow compared to the moral gravity of Schindler's List. Not career triumph, but spiritual collapse. What audiences didn't realize is that Spielberg created his most thrilling and his most devastating films in the same breath. Spielberg didn't win over everyone. Though hailed as a masterpiece, Schindler's List drew criticism from some scholars and survivors who argued it risked simplifying the Holocaust into Hollywood storytelling. Claude Lanzmann, director of the documentary Shoah, condemned it as obscene to dramatize genocide. Spielberg responded that no film could capture the Holocaust fully, but his duty was to reach audiences who might never watch a 9-hour documentary, not consensus, but conflict. What audiences didn't know is that even as it won Oscars, the film sparked fierce debate about how history should or shouldn't be told on screen. Spielberg hid a secret cameo in the final scene. As survivors place stones on Schindler's grave, one extra figure stands quietly among them, Steven Spielberg himself. The director filmed a brief cameo, but cut it from the theatrical release, fearing it would distract. For years, few knew he had even been there. He explained later that he wanted to physically honor Schindler, not just through cinema, but with his own presence. Not vanity, but tribute. What audiences didn't know is that Spielberg once stood, stone in hand, among the real Schindler-Juden, silently becoming part of the history he filmed. Schindler's List wasn't just a film, it was a wound, a prayer, and a promise etched onto celluloid. From actors collapsing under the weight of history to Spielberg's refusal to profit, every frame bled with reverence. Decades later, its legacy endures, not just as cinema, but as testimony against forgetting. So, if these revelations moved you, like and subscribe. Because remembering isn't passive, it's action. And in the words of the film itself, whoever saves one life saves the world entire.